Tonight on the Daily Debrief, a Kentucky man is charged with murdering his coworker. Were people cheating on timesheets? What was the motive? Plus, testimony in a Florida case where an ex-husband's friend is accused of killing an ex-wife. Also, DNA evidence in the months-long McStay family murders. Does it provide a strong enough link to a defendant? The nation's top criminal cases are on the Daily Debrief. It's Wednesday, February 20th. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Debrief. I'm Aaron Keller, along with Mike Koribanics. Opening statements today in the trial of a Kentucky janitor accused of murdering his coworker. This is actually the second trial for David Dooley, and he's accused of killing Michelle Mockbee. The lead investigator who worked on this case was having an affair with the prosecutor who handled the first trial. That first prosecutor also failed to turn over a surveillance video to the defense. A new prosecutor is now in office. During opening statements today, the prosecution said surveillance cameras did indeed catch the defendant making strange moves the day of the murder.
He gathers up the surveillance footage. What does he see? Well, there's everybody coming to work. Okay, everybody checks off. About 30 minutes after Michelle's death, about 6:30 in the morning, guess who's seen leaving? David Dooley. And he's not just leaving. He parks here. He should go out here. That's the way he goes. We looked at a month of surveillance. He goes in and out this way every single time. It was 6:30 in the morning, 30 minutes after Michelle Mockbee had been beaten to death. He gets in his truck and he goes all the way around here. Think he didn't want to be seen? Go ahead, Jeff. This is a still of David Dooley's truck going behind Thermo Fisher and Beckman Coulter. Now, go ahead, Jeff. Now, the police reached this conclusion. And ladies and gentlemen, the evidence in this case is going to be, I think you're going to be satisfied. Whoever did this left. Items that were used in Michelle's murder to this day have never been found at that warehouse. Items like the tape gun that bound her wrist. Items like the blade that cut her wrists, which I forgot to mention. Her wrists were cut. Her skull was fractured. Some blunt object was used to beat her to death. These items were never recovered. We think whoever did this left.
The prosecution says David Dooley gave conflicting stories about why he left. First, he said nothing about leaving. Then he told police his wife wasn't feeling well. Then he told a coworker he left because he ripped his pants. The prosecutor also theorized today that the janitor defendant was really good at cleaning up.
There were no conclusive footprints or fingerprints found in this case. There wasn't any real conclusive DNA in this case. We think a good reason for that is the person who committed this crime was wearing latex gloves, which he wore when he cleaned. Not likely to get fingerprints on things. Not likely to get trace DNA on things. And yet we still have this. Michelle Mockbee was, go ahead, Jeff, was drugged down a 40-foot hallway, a rug. You will hear from multiple witnesses. When you drag someone, it allows trace DNA to get all over them. Skin cells contain DNA. Hair contains DNA. It gets embedded in carpet. And when someone is drugged, particularly with the force of the weight of their body being drugged against the carpet, there's going to be lots of DNA on profiles. On Michelle's shirt alone, there were several.
But the police officers came, the two detectives, and they interviewed him. And despite what the prosecution said, he volunteered, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he volunteered to them that he left. He said, oh, by the way, before they even asked him, I forgot to tell you yesterday, I left.
The defense says the prosecution's theory makes no sense because the defendant's truck, the defendant's home, contained no relevant evidence. He must have cleaned up and disposed of everything in a 30-minute window. The police also collected no evidence from other workers at the plant. No cell phones, no shoes to examine for blood.
You want to equate motive with They've indicated that, oh, that's real, that's motive here, time cards. Okay, that maybe he was trying to break into the office. Well, there was no shavings on the ground to show that someone was breaking into the office. And if you really want to think about it, there's a, what's the thing, some kind of bolt lock or something. I can't think of the word for it right now. And if you're not going to get into an office with a screwdriver, if there's that lock, that bolt lock or something that's on there, really wanted to get in that office. I mean, it was a cardboard door. Every single officer probably looked at it. I mean, it was basically one of those thin doors that are kind of cheap. You wanted to get in that office, you take your foot in, you kick it in. Pretty simple, if you really wanted to get in the office. And what were you going to get in the office for? To steal your own time card so that you would be a suspect? You would be the first suspect. And Tom Seaman, who is the head manager of all that, will testify that all the time cards are, they copy them, they keep a copy, and they send them on to the corporate office, the copies. So what are you going to do? Steal your time card? They've already got a copy. The motive doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense.
That's how the defense wrapped it up. Joining me tonight is attorney Mike Koribanics here on the Debrief. So, Mike, this trash bag with the defendant's DNA, that apparently is the strongest DNA hit they have. But is it possible that his DNA was on it because he's the janitor? He put it in some receptacle.
Absolutely why it's there. I mean, I don't even think it's a close call. And especially it seems really there's such a logical explanation for it that I think it creates reason to doubt the state's case at this point in time, especially when the prosecutor is open to use the word "I think" so many times. You really don't want to be a prosecutor saying "I think" when your burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, you know, at least he's not overselling it, and I give him credit for not trying to oversell the other piece of DNA. But look, the defense is saying this is myopic police work. They just zeroed in on this guy because he's the one leaving. Maybe they didn't do a thorough enough search. There's that piece of it, but what do you make of the defendant's shifting stories as to exactly what he was up to that morning?
Well, you never know.
That's the bad piece for the defense.
That's a bad piece at first blush. But, you know, people don't realize till they're in that situation of the intimidating nature of the context and surrounding circumstances of being interviewed by the police. And you don't know, who knows, maybe he was at a girlfriend's house and he's back. There could be 100 explanations for it. But, you know, under that pressure, I don't think it's a very fair thing to really lead to a conviction in that matter.
Yeah, maybe he ripped a hole in his pants and he didn't want to get in trouble for leaving work early. Maybe he forgot to bring another pair. I don't know. I mean, if that's the case, though, we probably should hear something like that from the defense. Mike Koribanics will check in again with you at the end of the broadcast. A Florida murder trial entered its second day today. David Russell Holbrook Jr. is charged with murdering a mother of 3 back in 2006. Authorities say victim Melissa Howard was stabbed and beaten. She had just won a child custody battle against her ex-husband, Brian Howard. The defendant was Brian's friend. The ex-husband himself has an alibi for the time of the killing. The victim's son today testified about the custody dispute between his father and his mother, the victim. He also discussed the night his mother died and that dinner he was at with his father. That's the alibi.
Mom dropped you off. Can you just describe how that exchange went?
Very emotional. She was very upset. I knew something was off that night. My dad stayed in his vehicle and they exchanged words across the parking lot. I didn't want to leave her. She was really upset, and I wound up getting in the truck with my dad, and then we left and went to La Rumba's first.
What is La Rumba?
It was La Bumba's at the time. Now it's called La Rumba's. It's a Mexican restaurant across town.
So you said that your mom dropped you off at Azteca, but you went to La Rumba or La Bamba.
Yes, sir.
What was the purpose of going there?
That's where we were originally going to eat, but we didn't make any kind of reservations, so it was really packed. So we wound up going to Azteca, where they catered to us.
So you went back to Azteca now?
Yes, sir.
For the actual dinner?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Who all was at that dinner?
It was my dad, my stepmom Karina, me, my stepbrother Tyler, his best friend Jared, my aunt, my uncle, Bobby and Robbie Davis, Aaron Davis, a couple of my brother's friends, Jared, Nicole, I think Tito was there as well.
Look, that's a dozen alibi witnesses who can say the husband was not the one who did it because he was at this restaurant event. Earlier in this case, the victim's daughter tearfully described finding her mother dead.
All right, so you said there was a conversation about trying to jimmy the lock. Was someone successful in doing that?
We were.
Right, so what happened once the door was opened? It's okay, man. Take your time.
Once we were able to open the door, I went into the front foyer and I turned the light on.
What did you see once there was better light?
My mom lying there. She was lying on the wall all the way across.
What did you do once you realized that your mom was there?
I ran back out.
Where were Chris and Daniel while this was going on?
When I ran out, they stepped in.
Where did you go once you ran out of the house?
I ran over next door to our neighbor, Miss Deetra.
You ever go back into the house that night?
The state says a small area of DNA on the victim's sweater matches this defendant. The defense says it could have gotten there from a previous visit.
The evidence is going to show the state has some problems, and lots of them. You're going to hear from two DNA experts. One's from FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and they're going to say, I anticipate that their witness is going to say that there is some DNA that matches Russell. I believe that's what she's going to say. However, on cross-examination of that witness, let's see how she arrives at those conclusions. Were mistakes made? I think even through the state's opening, they admit that there was a contamination done by this very analyst. I think that testimony is going to be out there, that a contamination occurred during this investigation of this trial. The contamination occurred on the most important piece of evidence in this trial. You're going to hear B20E, you're going to hear, and you're going to hear lots of it. Now, we are going to present Candy Zulegger. She's our expert. She has years of experience. She's a former FDLE lab analyst. Okay, she's worked at FDLE before, and until recently, she owned her own lab. Candy Zulegger is going to explain that the DNA found that was tested by the FDLE analyst could be touch DNA, and she's going to explain to you what that is. That when Russell was, as the state has already admitted, when Russell was at her house 2 days prior, that his DNA, touch DNA, could have been left there. He could have sat on the couch, and he could have left some DNA there, or any other ways could have been left there.
The state is trying to present some surprise new evidence discussed late today that an attorney for the victim said that previous visit was not a friendly one, and the judge has to rule on that in the morning. Still ahead tonight, though, on the Daily Debrief, a Colorado man is headed to trial on charges he killed his fiancée, Kelsey Barrett, with help from an old love. Plus, DNA evidence in the McStay family murders. Is it enough to send the defendant behind bars or even to death row? We return to this months-long case after the break. Colorado fiancé Patrick Frazee will stand trial for the death of Kelsey Barrett. That decision came from a judge yesterday after a preliminary hearing. Despite having a child with Barrett, Frazee is said to have rekindled an old romance with Crystal Lee Kenny. Kenny told investigators Frazee killed Barrett after she aborted 3 previous attempts to kill Barrett herself. The first plan was for Kenny to poison Barrett. The second and third plans called for Kenny to attack Barrett with a pipe and a baseball bat. Each time, Kenny said she chickened out, so she claims Frazee eventually killed Barrett himself. Kenny said she cleaned up but left clues for investigators to find. Kenny also said Frazee burned Barrett's body in a tote bag. Testimony resumed today in a California murder trial expected to last months. Chase Merritt is accused of murdering his business partner, Joseph McStay, and McStay's entire family. The prosecution says the motive was money. That family disappeared in 2010. A dirt biker found the bodies of all 4 McStays buried in the desert in 2013. The McStay family SUV turned up near the border with Mexico not long after the family disappeared. And all through the case, we've heard that the defendant's DNA was in the McStay family SUV. Yesterday, though, the state's DNA analyst threw the certainty of the DNA into question. Some of the samples were too complex to interpret. Others were based on assumptions.
With regard to the Isuzu Trooper, did you receive item F37, which was identified to you as 2 swabs with the gear shift, 4-wheel drive lever, radio controls, heater, and AC controls from the Trooper?
Yes, sir, I did. Human DNA was recovered. There was a mixture of DNA from at least 3 individuals, and assuming that there were 3 individuals present, and that Joseph McStay Sr. was present as a major contributor, and that Summer McStay was present as a trace contributor, felt that the remaining alleles included Charles Merritt as a possible trace contributor.
Possible trace or possible minor contributor?
Well, I'm sorry, you said 38? Or 37?
I'm on 37.
37, as a possible trace contributor is how I reported it.
Okay. And with regard to the statistical analysis you performed, what were the numbers?
In this instance, an individual, if you went out and randomly picked an individual from the population to see if they would also be included, 1 in 3,300 Caucasians and 1 in 12,000 Hispanics.
And finally, did you receive item F36, which was identified as 2 swabs from the steering wheel of the Isuzu Trooper?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was the result of your analysis of those swabs?
Human DNA was recovered from those swabs. The results indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals. And if I assume the presence of 3 individuals with Joseph McStay Sr. as the major contributor and Summer McStay as a trace contributor, I felt that there was a minor contributor and that Charles Merritt was included as a potential for this minor contributor.
Okay, when you say it was included as a potential, can you explain that further, please?
Well, again, when I include somebody, it means that they're a possible source of that DNA. I then go on to do, again, another population frequency estimate about how common it would be to randomly pick somebody who would also be included as a, in this case, a minor contributor.
What was the result of that analysis?
The probability was 1 in 4.3 billion that I had for this minor contributor.
Okay, the defense says possibly included as a potential minor contributor. Is this enough to put this guy on death row?
I don't think so, and I really question the prosecution's motives here. People get intimidated by DNA, and I'm sure this defense is ready to show that DNA is not at all it's cracked up to be, especially when it doesn't come strong or in a great sample.
piece of DNA. Look at the difference.
I think, though, the prosecutor would have much more of my respect if rather than say, I don't want to oversell, he'd say, it's not really worth putting it into the case.
True. Okay. Defense attorney standpoint, Mike Koribanics, appreciate that insight, as always.
Thank you.
All right. That's going to wrap things up on the Daily Debrief tonight. I'll see you right back here tomorrow at 5 o'clock on the Law&Crime Network. Our live trial coverage picks up tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Have a good night.